Do we want to just live stream this? Do we just want to live stream this straight to YouTube?
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Or do you want to have the option to edit out this kind of...
Editing sounds nice, you know?
Okay.
I might say once, maybe twice.
I will not say that word at all. 0 times.
It'll be hard. Now I'm self-conscious of it.
Yeah. All right. So question of the day, Rafi, is that was an
I know. So let's restart that.
Where do you keep your money?
Where do I keep my money? So that's a fascinating question. I keep it in a lot of different places right now.
Yeah. I'm a bit of a...
and it's actually a great story. So as a child, I really wanted to get one of those small electric Jeeps that you can get, but like the little small ones that you could drive around with.
Yeah.
And I was, right before my growth spurt, and my parents gave us a allowance of about $2 a week. So if you do the math, it takes a hell of a long time as a child to earn enough money to get one of those little battery-powered Jeeps that you sell at Kmart or Walmart. So what I did accidentally was actually lose my wallet in the couch cushions. And I had, I don't know, about $60, $70 worth in the wallet. And, I was like, oh crap, now I have to restart saving. And so like, I was extra cautious just because I couldn't find it anywhere. Well, long story short, after a year, I was able to find my wallet, and all of a sudden I had enough money because I was saving the whole time to buy it. Unfortunately, I had hit my growth spurt, so I was no longer small enough to actually use it. And I remember being so pissed at my parents because they're like, hey, it's not actually going to be strong enough to support your weight now, for making me wait too long to buy that gift. But it did teach me an awesome, valuable lesson about keeping your money in multiple locations in case you lose it. And so even when I'm traveling, I will keep all important documents in like split 50-50 places. So if someone steals my bag or someone robs me at gunpoint, at least back in the hotel room, I have half of my documents or half of my money.
Do you even split it, put some money in a pocket and some in your wallet?
Yeah, I do. I split it in different locations, and I try not to have all my valuables in one location. But when it comes to investing, I also take a approach about like how risky I want to use it. So I have, let's see, I have a lot of money in the bank, which I think I need to start diversifying. I have some money tied up in real estate. I have some money tied up in a high-risk index fund, and we'll get to that later. I have some money in individual stocks, which are even higher risk. Mm-hmm. And I have some money in my Roth IRA, 401k. That's kind of like the disperse of everything that I have right now. And each one has different levels of risks, and I've kind of started to figure out what balances I feel comfortable with in different levels of risk. But it was a big game changer to me when I realized that it was better to have your money in different locations than keep it all in one, especially the bank. And the reason why I say that is because what hit me was that in the bank account, I'm earning 0.025% return on investment. So that means any risk that I take that earns more than that is getting me money. And ideally, I would want something that matches inflation, which is 3% or more. And so even
5%
like
this year.
5%, yeah, this year's nuts.
Though really, there is depreciation last summer.
Yeah,
which
so
is reflected in the
yeah, so realizing that by keeping all my money in the bank account, which was safe, or so I thought, because it was immediately accessible, mm-hmm. I was actually losing money each year by that inflation. And, I think this year is more telling than most is just how expensive things started to get. So realizing that I was losing money is a great way to kick yourself in the gear to actually start learning how to invest. So that's where all my money is.
Okay. It's interesting, since we've been talking about this, I've been starting to look at, just because I've got a number of bank accounts, I get paid into one bank account and I move it to got a house account for housing expenses and another one for like savings and another for like spending. And each one of them I keep some, hundreds or about $1,000 in each one. And since talking to you, I've been thinking, well, I can simplify this and free up some cash, put that into an investment account, and then actually make a little bit of money on that. Because what I've been realizing, and I'm pretty financially literate, and I have been since I was like a teenager. So I used to read the Wall Street Journal. I lost my shirt in the stock market on an individual stock that went bankrupt when I was 12. It's a story for another time. There, I said it. So I've realized the importance of investing early, and I just haven't always done that. So
yeah,
I'm starting, and I've been doing so since I was, started full-time work at a professional job when I was 28, but something I didn't really start doing when I was 22, 23, when I didn't have, I was making $9 an hour or $12 an hour. That wasn't really enough. I didn't feel at the time like I could save.
Yeah, I mean, I feel you there. I mean, right in college, my finance professor is like, you need to start, investing right now. I'm like, great, what do I do? They're like, index funds. I'm like, well, great, which ones? And I just kind of stopped there for years. And I just didn't think about it until I had a job. And they're like, okay, you have a Roth, you need to get an IRA and 401k. I'm like, well, what are those acronyms? And I had to learn, and it still took me about a year or two into the job before I actually set it up with earning money. So I lost, a year and a half worth of my 401k matching, which is 3%. But yeah, since college, so it's now close to 10 years, I spent on and off, months trying to learn finance and what to do and how to do it and all the different kinds of finance. And it was incredibly daunting. There's just so much to learn. So like, I can't imagine as a 12-year-old, you started to invest, or even like right out of college, like learning everything you need to know just so that you can make a rational first decision. It's one thing to someone to say, hey, go invest in the stock market, pick a broad, diverse index fund. And it's another to actually know what are your options out there and know why people recommend that one. Because I'm not the person who will just blindly follow. Though I did kind of blindly follow my parents' advice when I was setting up my Roth IRA account. But still, you got to learn what's out there, and that took way too much time for me to do.
Yeah, so I've got a Roth 401. Oh, I've got 401k, which is split right now 50-50 on my new contributions between Roth 401k and regular 401k, because there might be a right decision for me, but I don't want to do the math. So I'm just doing right down the middle. And then as well, from when I was younger, I have a Roth IRA with much less money in it, but still
So what was
significant amount.
What was the big aha moment that made you realize that, oh crap, I need to start investing? Or was there none of that? And you just kind of gradually learned about it and started investing?
Well, so I've been investing a little bit at least since college. I think it's probably listening to tapes my brother and my dad would play about Warren Buffett and how he got started in the investing world, or he had a little bit of success and then figured out the miracle of compound interest and went around to all his friends and family and got them to mortgage their houses and give them the money. And those people are now, have hundreds of millions of dollars quietly in the bank because they invested with the right guy. And nobody's really been able to answer the question whether Warren Buffett is really that good, or is he's just lucky. If he's lucky, he's been lucky for an awfully long time. Um, but what he's done, if you look at the year-on-year returns, is not really miraculous. He started as a fund manager, basically. I mean, that's not exactly how he did it, but he invested in safe things that he understood, and it just grew year after year. And it being invested in the stock market in, since 1950 or 1960 has not been a bad bet to be in. So he's kind of benefited from the time period when he's been active. So that's probably what, I mean, not that I ever wanted to be a billionaire, but.
Yeah, what is it that drives us to invest? I have my own personal reasons, and I know a lot of people invest so that they can retire someday. But I think that paradigm is shifting, and a lot more people are realizing, or at least in the people I hang out with, is that our bodies are decaying. And like my older brother, he is a circus performer, and he realized that once he's hit his 30s, maybe 35. You can't perform some of the harder tricks unless you really train your body. I mean, Olympic, level gymnasts, Olympic level gymnasts, they retire basically when they're 18 or 19,
right,
and their age, because that's, physical fitness. Not to say that you can't be incredibly fit later on. So like this idea of retiring at 65 or 75, 67, I think that no longer fits a lot of people's dreams and why they want to retire. I think the FIRE movement, financial retirement, something early, invest early or something like that, where they have just enough money coming in to afford them any kind of lifestyle that they need. As far as so I could be an artist, but I don't have to be a starving artist, and they could reduce the amount of hours that they work from the 40 to 60 hours a week to something like 20 or 10, depending on how much they earned and saved. And I think that kind of more relaxed style where you're still working, but you're able to pick your passions and not suffer because of them. My younger brother being a ballet dancer, he chose passion over finance. And it's been incredible to watch him try to dig himself out of the hole, that he went into, paying everything for ballet, which does not pay a lot of money, and it's highly physically demanding.
Right.
So he went the opposite route. So if he had given in a little bit more thought about how to fund himself, I think he would have ended up in a different place and maybe still be dancing to this day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that scenario is especially interesting to me, is people living in crisis mode. How do they grow out of that? And sometimes there's help from the government, sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's help from family and friends, and a lot of times there's not.
Yeah, and I think that's a hard question because it really depends on the crisis. But since he was always below the thresholds, like whenever a car broke down or something happened, that would basically mean he had zero money in the bank or negative. So he had to get bailed out. And trying to get out of that is incredibly hard. Especially when you're a ballet dancer trying to get a job doing non-ballet dance things.
Right.
Skill set. So now he's actually an office manager.
Okay.
He's doing quite well. I helped him negotiate a better salary, but I think
I'm sure the most flexible office manager around.
That's true. But the point is it was a really hard struggle for him to get out, and he's still not out of the rat hole by any means. But he's doing a lot better financially. And watching him throughout the years, part of it was a mental shift, figure out what he could do and how his skills apply to other careers and paths, so that he could sell himself in the right way and get hired. Because he would apply to every job under the sun, and how many rejections can you take? And another part of that is even as for 10 minutes a day, it's acquiring the skills that people find valuable, you know, because right before this job, he was a dental hygienist assistant. And so they're like, how did that have anything to do with office manager? But he was able to scrape the skills together. So I think it kind of sucky is that while you need immediate assistance when you're in that crisis mode, and that's what you feel and that's how you think, you know, the fight or flight, is that it seems that the way that people get out and permanently out of this is by slowly and steadily changing the way that they approach finance and their career. You know,
I I've seen it's partly education and partly mindset, but there's some people who could be dirt broke, but they could be rich or well off within a year or two because their education and attitude is such that they can go out and get that office manager job or whatever it is, start over as a software engineer. I've got an old housemate who did that exactly. And then there are other people who you can give them as much money as you want. This isn't true of everybody's sport, but some people you give them a ton of money and 2 years later they'll be broke again.
Yeah, it's true. And not to say that everything is mindset, because believe me, I've suffered more than enough job rejections to know that it's not just me and my attitude, if you will, or the way that I think. But the way that you think changes your behavior, and then obviously your behavior changes affects reality. So
Yes.
that's the way to look at it. So let's talk about how do one person who's not into finance, not into investing, kind of like tackle this whole thing that they've kind of put aside for years like we did. How did they get along the path to the point where they feel confident in what they're doing as far as handling money and growing their investments so that they can use it to support themselves, their family, and their loved ones?
Yeah, the first step is get a bank account. And there's a lot of online tools these days. My recommendation would be pick a bank close to where you live, go in person, set up an account, and while you're there, there'll be a bank manager or sales rep or somebody who you can talk to. Don't buy everything they're selling. They're gonna potentially want to sell you things, but at least get that bank account set up, and maybe as well an investment account, but only some people could say you can go through with something like Robinhood. There are other ways to invest without paying commissions these days. The bank I use, Fidelity, I can trade commission free. I don't know how it would be with just a normal local bank, but getting that brokerage account up and running. So you'll want to at least have either a savings or a checking account, and then ideally at the same bank, but it could be a different bank, a brokerage account without any trading fees.
Now, why is a bank account the first step, and what would be the things to avoid when they're trying to sell me all their add-ons or whatnot?
So the bank account is just to have a place. One, you can get paid into there, you can put your money into there. Two, it's hard to put money in and out of a brokerage account without a bank account. So this is kind of the source of the money. You wouldn't normally have a brokerage account that you could also write checks from, for instance.
Right.
Just the nature of the things, they are for different things or different purposes. I'll let you tackle the second question you asked. What should you be watching out for? Fees. Never pay any annual fees.
Right, and it's hard to say that you could avoid all fees whatsoever, because banks are businesses; they're not there to give free cash and hold it.
But they make money just by having your money in the bank account, because
That's
they say you've got 100 people with money in a bank. At any one point, maybe 5 people will want to take their money out. If everybody tries to take their money out, the bank won't have it. This actually happens it used to happen in the US. It hasn't happened since the federal government now guarantees uh, bank accounts like savings or checking accounts up to $100,000. So if there is a run on the bank will be fine because the government will step in and just pay all the deposits back. But because not everybody is getting their money out at the same time, the bank can take that money, loan it out, and get paid interest. And so they're making money just by you having that money sitting there. And that's
right.
also why they pay you a small interest amount.
Yeah. So learning about which fees there are there any like superficial fees that are like not typical that we should gotta look at? You know, I recently opened up a new bank account. And I was setting it up for a business, which was a little different, but one of the hard things is knowing what was normal.
Yeah.
And so that would be an interesting topic because I'm not an expert in bank accounts.
Well, one of my bank accounts wants to charge me a fee when I transfer money out of it. But if I use another bank and transfer money out of it from that bank, then it doesn't charge the fee. So I never use that bank to transfer money out. I just pull it out from another bank. That's one that you might want to watch out for. You've seen on Venmo or Cash App maybe that you can pay like a 3% fee so you can have the cash available immediately instead of after 3 business days. That's something you should never, ever, ever, ever do.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a pretty hefty fee. All right, so transferring fees are one. Low balance fees, so if you don't have the minimum, is another one that catches people.
That one is avoidable if you know that you're going to have that minimum.
Right. It's happened to me over the years just because I forgot. There's also fees where you might have enough money, but it's not in the right account, so checking or savings. And they will charge you for transferring the money so that you can pay whatever the bill is. So be aware of that, even though you might have enough money. Overdraft fees if you try to pull too much out of an ATM. Those are kind of the standard ones that you should expect to have in the bank accounts. I have a credit union, which is slightly different from a bank, but generally speaking, the credit unions have less fees or a different fee structure than regular banks, since they tend to be much more community oriented.
Okay. And is there anything special you have to qualify for to be able to be in a credit or use a credit union?
No, it's pretty similar to a bank as far as like qualifications. You might have
and they also have that FDIC guarantee.
Yes, I believe they do. At least the one I am part of. I don't know if
I would be surprised if it didn't.
Yeah, it would be very hard to invest in companies that didn't have that. So all right, so let's assume that I'm no longer saving my money under a mattress and I have a bank account. What now?
So brokerage account. This is so it's actually there's a limited number of people who can actually go on the stock market and trade stocks themselves, but those people are often working for banks, and so this person on behalf of the bank trades stocks. So Robinhood is tricky because they don't take a fee, but they give you kind of a difference. So if the stock is quoted on the stock market at 25, they'll sell it to you for $25.10, something like that. And that's where they pull out just a small difference and they take that as their fee.
So basically Robinhood is giving us a less than great deal.
It's not quite the market price.
I see.
Now, if this doesn't matter to you and you like the convenience and the usability of the Robinhood, it's not the worst thing. But probably I would steer most people towards a traditional brokerage account, just because there's a lot of trouble you can get into with the ability to do really crazy things on Robinhood.
Interesting. So I want to try to take the next question that I'm going to ask. Is
Maybe
like,
you use Robinhood. I don't know.
I do. I have Robinhood.
Okay.
I waited a couple years when they first opened up just to see that it would actually be like a thing. Turns out it was, and I created an account. I still use it today, and I use it knowing that they don't give me the best market price there is.
Yeah.
Um,
And for certain applications, like if you want to be really active on trading stocks, then that's, you know, a good option.
yeah, and I think
People
the
who are
next
investing to just for long-term savings, basically.
yeah, and I think the next question I have is like, all right, so I have this account, you know, what do I invest in? Like, how do I invest? And I think this comes down to your goals and the type of investments that you're going to look for. So I spent the last 10 years looking at every kind of investment, and you know, there's still more that I haven't looked at. Whether it's day trading, whether it's real estate, whether it's doing individual stocks or EFTs, or you know, mutual funds or bonds, or you know, business investing, you know, online courses, everything, you know. And there's lots of different vehicles. You know, you could take a boat, a train, you know, one of those electric cars that you wish your parents had let you bought as a child. But all those are just ways of getting you to your next destination. And I think the easiest and simple one to set up is the least hands-on, so that you can kind of like do it and let it sit and don't have to worry about it. Is one of the least risky investments when it comes to, you know, if you buy a real estate, you have to invest, make sure that the property's up, you make sure you have tenants, you know, that's a lot of maintenance. And it's going to give you a better return than your money in your bank. So I think the way that you should approach, and a lot of online articles I've read over the years agree with this, is that you have the minimum emergency fund. So like when those car repairs come in, you know, what's with cars always breaking down? But when you have some catastrophe that strikes, you're not going to be, you know, sweating whether or not you're going to have food on the table. So you should have that minimum. I've read it's anywhere between $1,000, just having $1,000. For me, I actually aim for about 20 grand. And the reason I have something so high is because that is the minimum I need if everything like blows up. And let's say, not necessarily I have a high medical bill, but let's say I lose my job. You know, it would take an average of 6 months for me to get back on my feet. And so that's where the 20 grand, this high amount was. But you don't need 20 grand. I think that's excessive for most people.
Mm-hmm.
But you have that in the bank, and that stays in the bank, and you don't touch it. Like that's for emergencies, you know. And then whether it's 1,000 or 20,000, and then the rest of your money, I think you should put into the market, and that is a index fund, which is a collection of stocks. And if you could do a mutual fund, that's a collection of stocks and bonds that tries to mimic the entire market. It doesn't try to beat the market, it tries to copy it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you think about it, how many times the market has crashed in your lifetime or in total, the chances of every single company.
Well, 3 that I remember.
Yeah, so like, the chances of every single company on the stock market going completely bankrupt is really small. So while the day-to-day fluctuations or month-to-month fluctuations are pretty significant, from based on my research, is anywhere between 12 to 15% annually. So that means that if you put $100 in, it could be up or down by 15% in any given year, right? So there are fluctuations, but the chances of getting absolute zero and losing everything is very small, you know, because that means every company in the market, or at least like the S&P 500, the 500 top major corporations went completely bankrupt, you know?
Yeah.
So I think investing in those index funds, which generally give a return of 7%, is the best and first investment that I would do.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, and I am doing exactly that with most of my money.
Yeah. And I think it comes in
So,
stages of confidence and
so the
experience.
my entire 401ks are in index funds. Most of my little bit in the IRA is an index fund, and even my savings, kind of medium term savings are in index funds. I've got a very little bit in individual stocks, um, you know, less than 5,000.
Right. But that changed over the years, right? You didn't start like that.
I mean, there's the playing around when I was a teenager where it wasn't really successful. And then early in my, mid 20s when I started the IRA, um, I bought 4 shares of Google, and then everything else was going into an index fund.
There you go. I was pretty smart back then.
Yeah, I don't even know what those 4 shares are worth, but I should have
Yeah.
bought.
Yeah. Apple,
I
Tesla,
should have
all
bought.
those.
I should have bought lots and lots of Apple.
That's right. I mean, I remember
When I
hearing
was
about
12
Apple.
years old in 1996.
Yeah, everyone was talking about Apple, and they're like, they got to, I don't know, $50, $60. I'm like, oh, they're
I could have
too
bought
expensive.
1,000 shares of Apple. I'd be a
Yeah,
millionaire.
that's right. Coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Yeah,
And even like this year with Dogecoin, if I had
yeah,
bought, and I knew about these coins for years.
right.
Early on
Yeah,
in
I
2019.
remember 2011 or 12 talking about
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
So, and for me, it's kind of been a migration from long-term to short-term investments and also increasing the amount. Because like I started with nothing. And then once I hit my job, I'm like, oh, I have these business accounts. I should take advantage of the free money. And so I just kind of set them up in the mutual fund. So I had stocks and bonds. Um, and I would just put in the minimum amount or the maximum amount later on for these retirement funds. And then a few years ago, I said, you know what, this is because I talked to some financial advisors and they're like, you're not saving nearly enough. And I'm like, well, I can't put it all into my retirement funds, or do I want to? Because then it's locked up until I'm old. So I started looking at how to do index funds. So I invested in those, and then I started dabbling with individual stocks. And so I've kind of increased not only the amount that I've invested, but also the risk. And so I have the different pools of like super long term for retirement. I have midterm for the index funds, and then I have like super short terms. Like you're saying, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And I'm throwing that bit of money, you know, and I'm taking those risks because I'm like, if it, if it goes up well, then I'll get 10 times the investment. And if I lose everything, then I lose, 100%, versus 1,000% increase.
And so this is where it's really interesting what Warren Buffett did, because he didn't take, he didn't play around with long term, midterm, and short term. He said, I'm going to put everything I have and put it into these relatively safe investments. Coca-Cola, insurance companies. What else is he invested? I don't know at this point.
Yeah.
Just kind of things that tend to get that 8 to 10% every year, and probably will never go away. Like insurance, it's hard to imagine that insurance could get replaced by anything. Like there's innovation there, perhaps, but the basics of it, it's hard to get past that existing. Or
Yeah.
sugar and drinks.
Yeah. And I think that's a great story, knowing that you could just put your money into these broad index funds that mimic the market. And there's a bunch out there. And honestly speaking, like they're pretty close to each other. So unless
And
you're,
there's probably one that mimics Warren Buffett.
yeah. But the thing is, like, you will be having consistent returns, and I think that's a fantastic place for people to start and people to end up. Because you don't have to do more than that. You could just pick these index funds, mutual funds, and invest in them consistently. And as long as you talk to your financial advisors or do the math on how much money you think you'll need when you retire, It's more of a math game as long as you have a job that pays than a game of chance or luck.
Right.
And I think for that paradigm of having enough money that you could quit, it's great. But if you want to retire early, then you have to start thinking about these shorter term investments on higher risks.
So things to watch for in index funds, high management fees,
Yes.
anything above 1% management fee is out. Anything for myself above like 0.75% or 0.65% is out. There's not a lot that I'm invested in that has a higher management fee than that. And
That's right.
This is just a percent of the value of the index fund that the fund manager takes every year for their expertise in choosing which stocks go, or stocks, bonds, and other assets that go into that fund.
Yeah.
And things like ETFs, electronically traded funds, these are mathematicians and other experts who wrote a computer program to make those decisions. And those tend to have a slightly less management fee, but it's something you want to check.
Right. And one of the things I was looking at is that over the long term, I mean, because the electronically traded funds are still relatively early, but from what I've read is that what makes someone successful or not successful when doing this kind of long-term strategy is not necessarily how well the index fund does, because it's just trying to mimic the market, but how little fees are there.
Yeah.
And so the least amount of fees to a point will get you the best returns over the long 30, 35 years that you're investing in them.
I actually re-engineered or tried to take, there's a target retirement 2050 date index fund through, it was kind of picked by the Fidelity Bank, which is, my company has the 401ks with this, with Fidelity. And I took what they had and I tried to mimic it with low cost funds. And so I put half into that fund and I put half into these kind of very low fee funds, which saved me on average something like 0.3%, which is not a lot. But in compound interest terms, it can mean a lot over 30, 40, or 50 years.
Yeah. Later on, when we get this channel doing like fancy graphics and stuff like that, we'll have some awesome charts.
Yeah, right.
And this is how much. Something right over here.
Yeah. That's right. That's how I should do it.
Yeah. Yeah, those small fees, while they sound like less than 1% might be trivial, over 30 years, you better believe that those are tens of thousands of dollars that are potentially, you know, not going to you.
We
so
really want to show that sometime.
yeah, I think that's, yeah, the realization that investing, like the chances of me losing all my money was practically zilch when doing an index fund, and being okay with having that money fluctuate anywhere between 12 to 15% on a given year.
Right.
Was the kick in the pants that I needed to start investing heavily into something, and not keeping my money in the bank where I knew I was only getting 0.05%. Right. 25, sorry, even less. So.
Okay, well, I think that's a good stopping point.
Yeah, so if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. As
Oh yeah,
always, like, share, and subscribe. I always wondered if a YouTube channel doesn't ask someone to do that, would they actually see a measurable difference in the likes, shares, and subscribes? Because like everyone asks for it, but I'm like, what happens if you don't? And it's just kind of like there.
That's a good question. I don't want to run the experiment. I want to just find somebody who's already tested that to find out.
Right. So is it worth asking people, or is like, is that just something?
Something I've noticed with some artists, these are musicians, they have zero shame in asking for support on social media. And they're like, please like, share, just stream this audio on repeat with your phone, with your volume turned all the way down. Hack the algorithm.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So I think there would be some sort of data geek out there who can compare channels that ask people to like, share, and subscribe, and those that don't, and see the growth rates.
I'd be interested to find out if YouTube analyzes the language, and if somebody asks for a plug or like a like and share, whether they put it lower in the algorithm.
Yeah. Fun stuff. All right. Until next time, John.
All right, Rafi, good talking. Are we just stopping the recording or leaving?